Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Intuition, Creativity, and Healing Summit. I have with me today Felicity Ain Doyle. Hello, Felicity.
Hello, so happy to be here.
I'm going to read Felicity's bio and then we're going to get started with some questions. Felicity Ain Doyle is a spiritual mentor, teacher, and soul alignment coach who helps people awaken to their inner guidance, heal the wounds that block their light, and live from the soul. She teaches how to use your soul's guidance as a clear GPS for life and as a tool to shift the narratives that keep you from abundance, clarity, and joy. Her path began after a near death accident at age 19 that left her with one leg and a heightened sensitivity to energy. What could have been a limitation became her greatest gift, opening her ability to feel energy deeply and guide others to sense and trust their own. Over decades of training in energy healing, holistic health, and spiritual practice, Felicity developed her signature work, The Unbound Soul, a framework for releasing the patterns that block guidance, and the Soul Sovereignty Blueprint, a path to reclaiming your true energetic power. She is also completing her book, A Compendium of Energetic Mastery, which teaches the foundations of energy and consciousness and how to use them to heal, expand, and live soul aligned. Felicity's passion is guiding others to embody their soul, trust their guidance, and step into the freedom of living as their truest selves. I love that bio, Felicity. I'm so excited that you're here today. Hello.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited. It's going to be a lot of fun.
Well, so first, let's get started. I just want to ask, how did you come to be a soul alignment coach? Like, what was sort of your journey around that?
Oh my God, that was a crazy journey because I never anticipated doing any of these things. I never planned on helping people to, develop their abilities, to tap into their soul's guidance, to do any of it. But what was interesting is that in my accident, that started the process because I really started listening to that deeper part of myself that's like always guiding you. And I think that as like these human beings, right, we have a tendency to not notice those inner subtle like ways that we're being guided. And we're so immersed in this physical experience that we just don't pay attention to it. But I don't know why. Obviously, it was part of my journey, to tap into that and feel that. And what happened was in after my accident, I had this like renewed sense of I need to get into healing work. Like I need to do this. I don't know why. I just have to, And so I got into acupuncture first because I figured like that is one of the oldest, methods of healing, and why not start there? And this is kind of how my inner guidance started guiding me, right? Because I did that, and then I went into a year of it, and then my inner guidance was like, "Nope, this isn't it." And and your analytical mind would be like, "You need to stick this out. You need to finish these things." But I trusted it, right? And then my whole experience went on this journey from collecting modalities, one after the other. I studied acupuncture and then reflexology and hypnotherapy and like on and on and on and on and on. But what was interesting is that, I'd be immersed into it. So, like, for an example, with hypnotherapy, I thought this is the thing. Every single time I get to one of those modalities, I'm like, this is the thing. I can feel it. This is what I'm going to be doing for the rest of my life, yay, And then I'll really understand the mechanisms of this. And then suddenly I get this feeling like, something's changing. Like, what is this? And then I get like this energetic disconnect to what I'm doing. And then I'm like, okay, I'm not feeling connected to this anymore. What's going on? Why is this happening? And then I feel like this new connection and shift to like this new modality. And so this is how it kept on going. But I still didn't figure that out. Like, I still didn't realize that this whole time I was being guided by my inner guidance, by my soul, essentially, through all these paths to these things until later in life, when I finally started putting it together and realizing, Oh, like that's the point. The point was going on this journey, trusting myself, trusting when my guidance said no, shift, or yes, go into this or whatever. And even though it didn't make, rational, like logical sense, like I trusted it anyway. And that's what really developed it over that, 40 years, whatever it's been, to do all that. So yeah, it's been an interesting journey.
I love it that you listen to it. I have so many students who I always say like the path of intuition, it's like a meandering path. There's
Yeah.
a lot of switchbacks, it's not a straight line up the mountain.
Yeah.
And I have a lot of people who are seeing it sort of as like, well, I'm failing. Like I
Yeah.
thought it was this thing, but I'm not sticking with it, so I guess I'm failing. And
Mm,
and I really struggle to get people to reframe that or to shift on that like there is no failure.
yeah.
Can you speak to that? Because I feel like me just saying, well, there is no failure. It's
Yeah. No, and this is so important too because I like exactly what you're saying. You get into this state like, oh, well, I should stay in acupuncture. I should have stayed. I should have done the whole program. Now I'm a failure because I didn't do it or whatever. But the thing is that that's not necessarily the point. The point isn't necessarily to acquire that knowledge or do those things. The point is to listen to yourself. And the point is to figure out like what yourself, your soul, your beingness is asking you to do in that moment. So a really great example of like doing just the randomest thing. Um, I was visiting my stepmother and my father in Maine many years ago, like 20, 30 years ago. And I had this guidance, like, why don't you crochet a hat and give it to the bagger at the grocery store? Because I'd been in there the other day and I had met them and they seemed very nice. And I was like, why am I receiving this message? Like, this is really weird. But I did it. It did it anyway. And even when I walked it into the bagger and they were just like, why are you giving me this? Like so many different aspects of feedback that, would normally tell you, like, what the heck are you doing? Like, this is ridiculous. But I trusted it and I did it anyway. And I think like the point is to make this deep connection with yourself because like you are that soul consciousness, right? And your journey, your purpose and all that stuff is to connect to that, is to like really get to know who you really are and through all of that obviously heal all the wounds and do the work and the shadow stuff and all the things, right? That help you to connect to your soul, but it's going to move you in all sorts of different paths and all sorts of different journeys. And if you keep on creating meaning about that, like negative meaning, oh, this means I'm a failure. Oh, this means whatever. Like that's all like coming from the wounded narrative. Also, that's coming from the wounded self because the soul self would be like, so what? Like it's okay, like we're checking things out and we're playing and we're exploring and we're learning and then we got ups and downs or whatever. So it's the wounded narrative that's like there's something wrong with you, if you're making this choice or whatever. So it's so important to try to step away from the wounded narrative that's constantly judging ourselves and then also like judging our circumstances. Yeah.
Mm. When you mentioned shadow stuff, I'm on your newsletter, and lately, like past couple weeks, you've been sending out really good stuff about shadow work. And
Thank
I
you.
just want to talk about shadow work a little bit. Like, I know some people are very familiar with it, and some people are not at all.
Mm,
What
mm,
what would be like, I don't want to say definition, but what's your idea of shadow work, and how does that look when you work with people who are doing shadow work?
mm. Well, I love this question because I have a very different perspective on it. So I would say, most people are really going into like the wounded aspects of self, right? So that's the shadow, the parts of ourselves that we're denying, which we end up projecting on others, So if I have a big anger issue or something, but I don't want to face it, I'm going to see anger issues in everybody else and be like, oh, look at you, or, or whatever. And that's just a part of the energetic dynamic so that I can see my wound reflected back to me, so that I can witness and acknowledge, those things. But in my work, I don't go into like the specific shadow, the specific narrative, the specific wound, and things like that. Like I find that the narrative isn't necessarily the path into healing. And so I tend to really focus on the energetics of it. So, not to say that I'm not addressing all the layers, because I'm also doing that, but I'm doing it mainly through the energetics. So, what happens when let's say you're triggered by a trauma, situation or whatever in that moment, immediately your energetics are contracting. You're getting into a fight or flight state, right? And your energy is like, I'm not safe. Things are not okay, right? And then in that moment, you start creating the narratives exactly like I'm not okay. It's not safe. I've done bad thing or whatever. All those different narratives that come in that are criticizing yourself or whatever and pointing out like the wounds in those moments. So you don't need to dig into what the wounds are because you're actually going to be reminded of what the narratives are and what the wounds are in any given moment through interpersonal relationships, even like doom scrolling on my phone, like, if I'm on YouTube Shorts or whatever, and I'm doom scrolling through there or whatever, and you can notice like yourself reacting to each person, right? And making narratives about them. Oh, they wear too much makeup. Oh, whatever. Oh, and all these things. And immediately you're being shown your shadow, right? You're being shown these parts of yourselves that you're rejecting. And what's really happening underneath that is your energy is contracting and shutting down. And what that means is that you're actually shutting down the universal life flow that's flowing through you in that moment because you don't want to feel that. You don't want to go into that. And so that locking of energy is actually causing long-term problems.
So, I mean, as because people in my audience are very empathic, highly sensitive,
Yeah.
a lot of healers. If we're talking to someone and we sense, oh, I'm talking to their wounded self, or this person's
Mhm.
very defensive, they're projecting on me, what should we do? Should we try to sort of really be the healer with them and connect even more? Or should we say, no, they're speaking from their wounded self, I'm going to back off? Like what should be a strategy for an empath or someone who has that healing compassion energy to work
Mm.
with someone's wounded self?
I love that. Yeah, because that is such a challenge too. As a really sensitive person, and usually those sensitive people like really want to help, right? We want to help heal and do these things. But the thing that I learned the most, like as I grew up and aged and matured, was the wisdom not to speak, the wisdom when to say something, and the wisdom when not to say something because like when a person is really caught up in their trauma and their wounds and their projections, they may not be ready to even see or talk about any of that, right? And when you bring that up, you may get the onslaught of their emotional response, to you. So as a sensitive, you want to kind of put your feelers out there for what do I do in this moment? How do I respond in this moment? And really checking in with yourself, really going inward and really feeling and really noticing What is the best course of action in this moment? But ultimately, we want to get to a place where we're being really intelligent about, the ways that we're communicating with one another. Like, for an example, if I'm having a really hard day, let's say something really intense happened to me, and I just really need to vent all the stuff, right? And normally we'd probably call up our bestie and be like, I had a really shitty day, and kind of like barfing out like all their emotions onto that person and just leaving it there, right? So then that person is like, thanks, or whatever. But what you want to work towards is being able to have that intelligent conversation, like, hey, I had a really overwhelming day. I do need to kind of off, some of this energy. Are you able to hold space for me so that I can do that? And either they'll say yes or no, right? Maybe. And if they say, maybe they might say, look, I can't do it today because today is really intense for me, but tomorrow I am wide open and I can hold space for you and hold your energies and, reflect things back to you that you need or whatever. And that way you're being really conscious about like your energy and your impact on others. Now, when it comes back the other way, right, and you're dealing with it from that person, you want to be really delicate about how to approach that because they are in a very emotional state where it's like they've got the goggles, right? Glasses to where they're only seeing the wound, right? They're not really seeing you. They're not really seeing the situation for how it is in this moment. And so however they're acting in that moment is going to be based on whatever trauma things are going on in their mind. So you just want to be really careful about how you communicate with them. And if you notice that things are escalating quickly, just back off,
Hmm.
But, there are ways to approach. I mean, my daughter does it really well with me. She'll do like caveats, like, hey, mom, I really don't want you to be mad at me about this, but I need to tell you something, and then that way I'm like, okay, I'm prepared. You And then we can talk about it. I'm not going to escalate because she's already warned me, right? So if you know that person, then kind of finding those ways in where you can kind of soften the approach and get into that sensitive place where they're more receptive, if that makes
Mm.
sense.
Yeah, when you said like sometimes you just kind of need to barf it all out. I
Yeah.
feel like I mean obviously we all have that, but the people in my classes, I know they would say, but I'm the one who's always getting barfed on.
Yeah.
And it's everyone in my family or my coworkers because we are the constant counselor. We kind of instinctively know how to hold compassionate space. We're
Yeah.
the listener. And that what goes along with that with my students, they say, I'm so tired all the time. I'm just so drained. Life is overwhelming. I don't want to do anything but be at my house. I can't go out. And I usually
Yeah.
find that it's kind of a boundary thing and also not
Yes. So I was
what.
going to say.
So and can you speak to that? Like people who are highly sensitive, does their energy feel different?
Yeah. Well, yeah, there's a lot to it. So, firstly, I want to go into that aspect of boundaries because, yeah, if you are a big giver, it's sorry to say, it's usually because you don't have good boundaries. And I was one of those, big time. And I ended up, attracting a narcissist marriage, which is the natural dynamic between the sensitive with no boundaries and the narcissist. Like they fit together perfectly because, and I know that sounds kind of terrible, but
I had one too. That's why I'm nodding. I'm like,
right?
yep, been
But
through it.
what it does energetically is it pushes you to create healthy boundaries. It pushes you to love yourself more. It pushes you to stand up for yourself, and all the things that you're needing to do. So ultimately, it's not that that narcissist person is trying to be that jerk. It's that there's a bigger picture there energetically and spiritually that's trying to like push you into your power, right? Now, as far as sensitives, the thing about us is that we have a really big bandwidth of essentially picking up data, right, and processing data. So we're really good at it. We're really good at noticing, very subtle bits of information and stimulus, which means that we also get stimulated too much, and overwhelmed too much. And so we really need to have good, like personal energetic hygiene, which is also one of the things that I talk about in my book too. But, I think it's so important because if you aren't regulating your energy throughout the day, if you aren't paying attention to how your energy is responding to things and whether or not you're going in and out of alignment, because that's the thing, like your soul has a guidance system. I call it your soul's guidance system, like your soul's GPS or whatever, but it's constantly letting you know when you're moving in and out of alignment or when, you're listening more towards your trauma voice and your wounded self or your soul's voice. So it's always letting you know in every moment, in every situation, and also in your internal thinking. It's letting you know when you're moving one way or another. So the most important thing for that sensitive or anyone ultimately is learning how to discern their internal voices and shifting to that soul-based voice, because the problem is that as a sensitive you're also overly sensitive to the trauma voice, right? You're overly sensitive to the wounded story and the internal pain and all the different things, right? And you get triggered a lot, but what that means is that you have the potential to be really, really strong and aware when you start shifting to that soul's voice. Because this is, sorry, I'm going back and forth here a lot, but
That's perfect.
when you do this, see the trauma voice is what blocks your intuition. It's what blocks your connection because you're essentially moving further and further away from source. You're moving further away from that soul-based connection and into the fear and into the wounded ego aspect of self. And the more and more you heal yourself and work on those things, especially as a sensitive, the more and more you're opening up your abilities, you're connecting to your guidance, and it's really strong and really powerful that way. So it's really important to do this process, especially as a sensitive. Does
Mm.
that make sense?
Yeah, there's so much in there that, and
I
you're
know.
really like saying my experience. Because when I was younger, I was so wounded,
Yeah,
such low self-esteem, so much self-doubt.
same.
And as I've moved into the soul voice, I'm really strong to the point now where people are like, "Well, don't you want a second opinion?" And I'm like, "Nope, need no other opinion than my own." I know I come
Yeah.
off as like kind of stubborn and maybe
No,
strong.
but when you know, you know. That's the
Yeah.
thing. Like, that's the thing what I talk about with your soul's voice. So, your soul's voice uses your energetic feeling sense and your energetic knowing sense, right? And so, you'll feel something, you'll feel it, and it'll resonate as truth. And then you'll get the knowing of, like, yes, this is truth, right? And then when you feel and know that, like, there's no ability for someone to be like, oh, that's wrong. You'd be like, no, because I know it. Like I know it deep in my beingness. There's no way you can tell me.
Yeah, and that's I think from the outside, people kind of think, well, aren't you being impulsive or
Yeah.
or maybe you're being a little bit arrogant and it's like, no, it's this knowing. I
Yeah.
know this is right.
Yeah, well, the analytical mind wants to try to undermine that, right? Because there's times, let's say that your knowing will be like, "Oh, I need to make this choice," right? But then your analytical mind is like, "Oh my God, that's really impulsive and really dangerous. That might be really bad. You might spend all your money, all these different things, right? That are trying to like undermine, the soul's voice and the soul's choice. And this is where you have to be be really good about discerning the internal voices, right? Because if you're like not really sure about, your soul's voice and what it's saying and whether or not to follow it, then all those questions, from the fear-based voice are going to totally derail you, and then you're not going to do the things that were totally aligned for you.
Hmm. Well, and it just gets so clear. It's almost like somebody gives you some options like, do you want for lunch? You could have a piece of cardboard or a sandwich or some sand. And you're like, well, obviously I want the sandwich, and people are like, but how did you know? How did you know you? And it's like, well, the other two things weren't even food. This is like so easy, but it's hard to teach other people to get there. Like,
Yeah.
and so, I mean, what would you say to someone who's saying, I really want to be there. I really feel intuitive, but that I don't know if it's the voice of fear or, like you said, the trauma voice. It's drowning so many things out. How can you
Mm.
get to this really clear, strong connection with the soul voice?
Well, they have different like energetic qualities, right? So when you're listening to and feeling the fear voice, your energy is contracting, right? It's contracting inward, and it's getting like you might call it stress, you might call it anxiety, you might call it fear, you might call it tension, whatever it is, all of those things are telling you energetically that you're moving further away from your soul. And that even though you might want to try to sort through like the thoughts and the ideas and the things to try to find the pieces of information within that contracted state that are still viable, ultimately just let it all go because you're trying to sort through something that at its very foundation is pulling you out of alignment and away from source. So anything that makes you feel that way, let it go. Like, let those thoughts go, the anxiety thoughts, the fear thoughts, the whatever thoughts, let them all go because there's really nothing in there that you're going to be able to take out of it that's going to be usable in that moment. And then what you have to do is calm your nervous system so that you're not in that contracted state. And then from there, you need to shift into the narrative and the voice that is the soul voice from there. So learning how to discern, for an example, what is an energetic yes? So if someone says to you, hey, let's go out to this place or whatever, and instantly your beingness is like, oh my God, yes, this is so exciting. I can't wait, and you can feel the intensity of it and the glee and the, oh my God, right? That's an extreme yes. That's your soul. Like, why otherwise would that happen? You know what I mean?
Hmm.
And so noticing like energetically what is your bandwidth of communication, right? What is an extreme no? What is an extreme yes? What is everything in between? And really starting to notice because the thing is that your energy is constantly guiding you in every moment through those contractions and expanded states to leading you towards the fear voice or leading you towards the soul voice.
I always tell my students, and people fight me on this. I say the things you're supposed to go towards, they will sound like fun.
Yeah,
That's basically it. It'll just sound fun to you. And people are like,
yeah,
no, it can't be
yeah.
that.
It can't be that easy.
I'm like, no, it is. It could be a bunch of different things. It might be sorting buttons, or it might be
Yeah,
starting a novel, or it
yeah.
might be, like you said, going to a certain location, but it will sound fun. It will
Yeah,
feel
like
like
that
fun.
glee. Yeah, yeah, totally. But I think one of the challenges, that people have is like, okay, well, I'm feeling fear though. Am I feeling fear because it's contraction because I should avoid it, or contraction because I'm afraid to step into it? I'm afraid to, you know what I mean? Step
Mhm.
into my power and step into that experience or whatever. And so this is where when you develop that soul's voice, you can actually trigger different questions, so you'll bring those questions inside of you and you'll ask them and then you start noticing, am I contracting to that question or am I expanding to that question? And then that's when you start getting like confirmation and validation, these are the choices that I should make, or this is aligned, or whatever. Or, oh, I'm feeling this fear because I really want to do this, but I'm frightened, versus I need to avoid this. So it's really learning how to use that soul GPS in that moment and start asking those questions and noticing, like, okay, this is what I need to do. This is how I need to do it, or whatever. And the really cool thing about using this mechanism is not only is it taking you to your highest potential, right? Your most soul aligned potential, the more you listen to it, but it will also just take you right to your purpose, like because your soul's voice is an extension of your purpose, right? So you're just going to go there. You don't have to know all the answers. You don't have to know like, oh, like what your purpose is and all these different things. You just listen and just follow it and trust it, while also, like you said, following those things that light you up.
Mm-hmm. What, and you mentioned energetic hygiene. Is that part of this? Is that part of, does energetic hygiene come into play as you're figuring out what the yes is for you and the no is?
Well, it's definitely a part of like daily maintenance, so to speak, right? And like monitoring and tending to your energy, because you're responsible for your physical body. You're responsible for your energy. You're responsible for whether or not you're bleeding out or barfing out that energy, onto others, or whether or not you're getting overwhelmed by other people's energy. So it's so important to moderate your energy, because otherwise, you're going to get overwhelmed, or you're going to affect somebody negatively, or whatever the case may be, right? And so it's so important to not only moderate your energy, but build your vital energy daily, because so often we're doing things that are depleting our energy, right? We're doom scrolling all day. Maybe we're not eating the right foods. We're not getting out into the sunlight. We're not tending to ourselves. And this is especially challenging if we didn't have good parenting. If we don't know the things that we're supposed to do to take care of ourselves. One of the things I didn't realize when growing up is, oh, I have to be responsible for my well-being, my self-love, and all these different things. Nobody's going to tell me this stuff anymore, and so, and it's not just about like tending to your physical body and taking a shower and brushing your teeth or whatever. It's really tending to like all aspects of self and your energy, and noticing your energy in every moment. Like for myself, I'm aware of the energetic reality and the physical reality in every moment. Like there isn't a moment that I don't notice both worlds. And this is because of my accident, because of my leg and all these things. But that's the thing, like you want to get to that point where you're always noticing, oh, my energy just fluctuated. Whoa, I just got derailed energetically. What was that? And then the sooner you're bringing yourself back into balance, like the faster your energy is staying like aligned. And that means you're so much more powerful that way, because otherwise, right, if your thoughts are thinking about all these things, and you're thinking about anxiety things, and you're letting yourself get derailed, and you're not eating right and all these things, your energy is leaking everywhere, right? And so the more that you start tending to that and pulling back your energy, then you have so much more energy to use towards creating your reality, or tending to yourself, or the power of your words and your language and how you affect others and things like that. So it's so important to tend to your energy.
Well, and so I mean, this goes along with it, but it's kind of like a out of left field too. It's about other people. When
Yeah.
you said, tending to your own energy, I've had experiences in my life when I was younger, I would just push through, but I'd be around someone who is very inside, very chaotic, or very controlling, or very wounded, or they had like a storm. They had some kind of like emotional, energetic storm going on that was just their current energy pattern, and I would feel awful around them.
Yeah.
I'd be out to dinner with friends, or I'd be at a workplace, and I would be around, these people, and slowly start feeling worse and worse, get a migraine, a stomach ache, And now that I'm older, I feel it coming on and I'm like, oh, it's that one over there and I got to get away. I
Yeah.
have to leave. What can you say about the experience? Because I always had this, like you said, the analytical mind comes in, and when I'd
Yeah.
say, "Oh, I'm imagining it, I'm being dramatic," no, that person's fine. They're just sipping their martini. They're
Yeah, they're
having
not doing
exercise. They're
anything. Yeah,
laughing. Yeah.
exactly.
When my intuition
Exactly.
is like something's very wrong here, get away.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and this is the thing too, in bringing that information into your soul's guidance, right? To kind of ask those questions to figure out what do I do? How do I respond or whatever, and things like that. But sometimes it's that they are triggering your wounded energy, right? So you're needing to kind of figure that out and be like, okay, are things getting exacerbated because they're reflecting my wounds to me, and now it's really intense and I need to process this information? Or is their energy and my energy making becoming discordant essentially, so that we're bouncing off of each other and in an intense way. And because I'm so sensitive, I'm picking this up, and then what do I do in these moments? So, for an example, I had attended a meditation that my friend was putting on. It was a group meditation where she was going to be taking us in to connect to our higher selves. And well, it would have been a fabulous meditation had I been able to participate because right before it started, two people came in and sat down right next to me, and their energies were so intense. I think that my system didn't know how to regulate in that moment based on the energy that I was picking up. I was like getting really intense. I couldn't regulate the energy. I thought I was going to have a panic attack in that moment, but I was kind of closed off in the corner of the room. So there was no real easy way to get out of there. So I was like, okay, what do I gotta, I have to do something in this moment. So the experience that I had was very different than everybody else's journey because what I ended up doing was pulling my energy all the way in. Now, as a sensitive and especially as a feeler, you have a huge energetic field because you're wanting to feel everything. You want the information, especially if you've been through trauma. Your feelers are out there like assessing everything and letting you know everything. And so you have that huge energy field, right? And so I pulled my energy field all the way in, and it was weird because I hadn't done that before to that level, right? To where my energy field was not touching their energy field at all. And then in that point of awareness, I'm essentially kind of thickening my field so that their energy isn't coming into my field, and so that I have the space to now regulate my energy. So now I'm not getting more stimulation in that moment. I'm not getting more overwhelmed in that moment. And now I have the ability to start regulating my energy. And so that's what I started doing in that moment, is just kind of bringing myself to a point of calm, and then essentially figuring out how to regulate that energy that's coming in so that I'm not continuing to escalate. And by the time that I was done, I learned a lot about energy through that entire process. So I encourage you that, like, don't react like the victim to these circumstances. You know what I mean? Like, don't be like, oh no, now I have to go decompress and, blah, blah, blah. No, use it as a tool in this instant. Like, this is a great opportunity for you to bring yourself back into balance because ultimately the goal is being able to, how do I say this? It's like you don't get bowled over by things. You're able to to hold the intensity of that moment and let it flow through you without dysregulation. You know what I mean? So the more that you can practice that in those circumstances, starting with circumstances that maybe don't feel quite as overwhelming as that, and then work up to the point where you're just not getting dysregulated by things. You're able to stay balanced and clear and in that moment, and that means you're becoming sovereign of your own energy.
So, okay, so in this vein, I've had this experience my whole life, and
Mm,
other sensitive intuitives have told me as well. I'll go to, a matinee showing of a movie because I try to go to the 11 a.m. movie because it's
mm.
deserted and it's early, and the movie theater's empty, and I go and sit in the far corner, and one other person will come in and come sit next to me. Or or it's like the 6 a.m. yoga class. I'm like, no one's gonna be there. And I go to the far
Yeah.
corner and one other person comes in and puts their mat out next to me. And then they usually will start talking to me. And
Yeah.
I am like, what is going on? Is that the big energy field that you're like, we sort of attract people and then they tell us their life stories and they start connecting?
Yeah, well, you, as a sensitive and as a very open sensitive that might not have very good boundaries, you essentially have this thing like, come talk to me. I will help you. I will, I will cross my boundaries to do whatever I can to help you in any way, right? So you have this kind of like beacon. I used to have it all the time. When I was in my 20s, I used to go out to the bar and invariably I would be like some like older men would always come up, or guys who had just gotten out of their relationships and needed a shoulder to cry on, or like all these things. And I would just be like, why is this happening all the time? But it's like, yeah, you do have that. But also, it's that greater consciousness's desire to help you regulate, right? Because this is a place where I can't think of the right word. I don't mean vulnerable, but it's like it's a place that you need to heal. It's a place that you need to work on, right? And so it's that greater consciousness's way of, okay, this is something that needs to be addressed. So here, you're attracting these things because this is something that you need to work on. So I encourage you to never look at those situations like, oh no, now I need to move, or oh, this is so frustrating. Because when you do that, when you respond in that way, you are contracting your energy, right? You are now moving away from source because you're getting frustrated. You're getting into that state of resistance, right? Of, I don't like this. I don't like how it is, right? And ultimately, what you want to move into is that state of grace of, okay, all right, let's see what plays out. Let's see what happens. And let's see how I adjust to this and how I regulate myself in these instances. And if that means, hey, I'm going to go move over here because I really want some time to myself, that's okay, because that's also asserting your boundaries in a healthy and loving way. So it's about really listening again to yourself, to your guidance, and what do I need to do in this moment? Do I need to be present with this person in this moment? Maybe they need my guidance. Maybe, in this moment, I'm going to download information for them from source that I need to be that vessel of information for them. Or maybe I just need to be like that parallel play, like energetics for that person so that they're not feeling so alone, or whatever it is. But the fact that we're assuming that it's the worst case scenario, that they're there to annoy us or whatever, and that we're getting into a state of resistance about that, that's not what you want to do. Does that make sense?
Oh, yeah, it definitely does. And when you said I will cross my boundaries to help you, I was like,
Yeah.
oh, that could be the title of my life story. If they made like a TV series about my
Right?
life
Yeah,
story,
me
I
too.
will cross my boundaries to help you. And that's something that comes up with my students so much too is this question of guilt. People say, but I feel guilty
Mm,
saying no. I feel
yeah.
guilty not helping. I feel guilty, taking time for myself. What is this? what's this guilt energy? Does that come from the trauma voice, or is that
Yeah,
something?
that's the wound. That's the
Okay.
wound. So the something happened to you at some point that made you feel like it's not okay if you don't give, it's that you need to give all of yourself or you're not going to be loved, whatever those narratives are, right? And so then you feel like, okay, I have to do this or I need to be this way or whatever. Like guilt is absolutely from that wounded state. And so the thing is you want to really sit with that. You want to sit with that feeling and don't judge it. Don't be, oh, why do I feel guilty? I shouldn't feel guilty, because again, another narrative, another narrative. So stop all the narratives in that moment. Sit with the feeling of guilt because ultimately guilt is a vibration, right? It's a vibration turning inward, kind of like you're attacking yourself and feeling bad, right? And any energy that's turning in on itself is damaging, okay? You are actually damaging yourself by doing that. And so instead, just be present with that feeling and feel it, but not through the mind, not through the like, oh, I'm just kind of observing it, but you really want to make it a somatic experience that you're really feeling the tangibility of like the energy of guilt and what it feels like. And at first, it might get more intense. And then the narratives are going to want to trigger even more. They're going to be like, oh, this is too intense. I don't think I can do this or whatever, and all these things. But you're like, shh. You're like, it's okay, and just sit with it more and sit with it more. And then the deeper you go into it, you really start unearthing, like you might have memories that pop up. That are at the foundation of that wound. You might have more emotions that surface. You might want to cry, whatever it is, whatever the energy that's trying to express itself in that moment, you're wanting that energy to complete its cycle because that's what happened in the trauma, right? So there's kind of like this trauma cycle of energy. And what happens is like there's a part of us that gets overwhelmed in that moment of overwhelm, I guess, where something happens that like overwhelms us and freaks us out and we can't manage that, right? And normally animals, right, they go through the full cycle, right? And then they shake it off and they're fine. They go run off and play and do their thing or whatever. But if our nervous system and our energy and our emotions are dysregulated in the way that we can't make that full cycle and we get stuck in that narrative, that emotion, the feelings, like my emotions are too overwhelmed. I can't handle this. I can't regulate myself or whatever. And then you get stuck in that. And then you're like, I don't ever want to feel this again. This is so intense. And so you kind of like lock it down
Mhm.
inside of yourself, right? And it's locked down in all the layers. So it's the contraction, it's the emotion, it's the fight or flight, it's the programming, it's all the things together into one lock. And so when you're going into like that feeling, that you're feeling in that moment, you're not just like releasing the emotion, you're releasing the energetics, you're releasing the narratives, you're doing all those things, within that. So it's really important to bring that awareness to that, but without judgment, without trying to change it, without trying to push it away, and just like bringing your conscious light to it, essentially.
Mhm. Well, something my students always kind of really struggle with during this process. I mean, this is deep personal growth,
Yeah.
really, where you're really healing these old wounds. Some of them are very deep. You're changing as a person. A lot of it happens in midlife. And my students say, I'm losing a lot of people. A lot of relationships are ending.
Mm,
I feel like I'm a new person, and it feels so lonely.
mm.
Are the new people going to come in? Is it always going to be like this? Can you speak to that, these really intense periods of growth? Is it normal to lose relationships and struggle with loneliness?
Yes, absolutely. Because and this happens as a part of your awakening too, right? Because you're shifting from, the wounded ego narrative, and all these different things. So your whole life is built around like this personality of who you are, and how you respond to things. And then all your friends are like, we really like the ways that you respond to things because that matches our wounds. So we're good with this, right? And then when you start changing, right, you're like, you start waking up and you're like, this doesn't work for me anymore. Like, I need something different. And you really start listening to your soul. Like, that's awakening is when you really start listening to your soul and you really start realizing you crave something else, there's something needs to change, something needs to give. It can't keep on going like this. It's not okay. And invariably, you will lose those people unless they're able to shift along with you. Now, I wouldn't bet on it, because a lot of people, we generally like to stay in our wounded states, and so it's okay. There will be a period of what feels like isolation, where you're not having those relationships. But the thing is that what you're doing is you're shifting your baseline frequency as you're doing these things, right? So in the wounded state before, you're vibrating at that certain frequency of that wounded person, right? Which means you're attracting all those people that are aligned with that, who really love that, who are in that same place as you, right? And now as you're shifting your frequency, you're moving up to this new frequency and you are no longer aligned with that frequency anymore and those types of people. Now, some people may be like, yeah, I can meet you at that or meet you close to that, and still kind of have that relationship. But what you need to do is keep on being you, keep on shifting. You're ultimately working on shifting to your most authentic self so that you feel safe being you and you're not worried about who's going to love you, who's going to accept you or whatever, that you're just radiating that energy. And I tell you, you are going to attract those people, but it takes a little bit of time. And in that interim, you don't want to be wavering back and forth. Oh, I need to go back into this energy and be this way or whatever, and then you're kind of going back over here or whatever, because you're giving that energetic like pulse out of, well, now I'm here, now I'm there, now I'm here, now I'm there. So you're not going to ever like really attract the aligned people until you really settle into who you are at that new vibration and then allow and trust. You've got to trust see, that's the thing about the universe. The universe is always giving you whatever the frequency that you're radiating, right? So whatever frequency you're at, this is like the basis of manifestation. Whatever frequency you're radiating at is what you're going to be attracting in that moment. So those friends, those aligned people, and all those things are coming. Just give it some time.
I love that you said, we like to stay in our wounded states because
Yeah.
the people in my classes are so into personal growth, but they're struggling with friends and partners and
Yeah.
family members that don't want to shift. Why do people want to stay in the wounded state? Is it because it's easy or is there like an addictive quality to it?
It's because it's safe. It's because it's what's known, right? Even if, like, for an example, let's say you're in a really abusive household, right? You grew up in a really abusive household. This is what's normal to you. Like as a child, you don't know that that's not normal. And for you, that's what love means. That's what safety means. That's what normal means, right? And so you go out into the world and you're doing other things and everything feels so foreign and you're like, I don't know how to react to this. I don't know if I like this. I want to go back to what I knew because at least what I knew I could handle and all these things that I'm experiencing now, I don't know how to handle them. So that's the piece. I think that when you learn how to regulate your energy so that you're not getting overwhelmed in those new situations or whatever, then you can shift into that. It's like being able to be the vessel that can hold the energy, and you're starting to grow, you're starting to blossom, but then you're like, I can't do this, and contracting, contracting, I can't do it, I gotta go back, I gotta go back, or whatever. But ultimately, you want to go to the point where you're like, I can handle this. I can be in this place, even if it feels uncomfortable and scary and new. I'm okay, and it's going to be okay, and some good self-talk, to support yourself in that place. But yeah, that's what it takes because this is what's familiar, this is what's known, and this is how you defined love.
Hmm. Well, and you said manifestation work, and I always say manifestation work has to happen slowly so you can acclimate. You can
Yeah.
acclimate to the new energy. And I say if you want an example of when it doesn't work, look at people who've won the lottery
Yeah.
and
Oh
they've
yeah.
won millions of dollars and they're not ready yet. It's too fast and they will get rid of that money. They will
Yeah.
find a, no matter how much it is, they will find a way to get rid of it to get back to the old energy because they
Mhm.
just can't, it's too much.
Yeah, you can't sustain it. You can't sustain it. I did that the other day actually because I had done a lot of self-growth like on my wounds, and I was working on really expanding my energy and being able to be that bigger vessel to hold the energy, right? And then, boy, something triggered me, and I was like, "Burn," like, right back into that state or whatever. And I'm like, what? What happened? I was doing so good in this moment. But yeah, that's the thing. Like you're not wired to hold that shift yet. So for those people that won the lottery, they hadn't done the inner work to be able to sustain like that frequency of living and that lifestyle. They only can live at the other lifestyle in that moment until they do the work. So that's why it's usually better to like build, your income because you're also building that narrative of, I'm worthy of these things, right? It's okay to have this money. It's safe to do these things because it's all those narratives usually surrounding money that make it go right down the drain.
Well, and I think it's the same for any realm. I
Yeah.
know people have been in abusive, dysfunctional, intimate relationships forever.
Yeah.
And then I say, instead of looking for the dream partner, try to make friends with someone first. Just have a
Mm,
safe friendship, kind of ease in, kind of just stick
yeah.
your toes in the pool to sort of like acclimate to that energy. And I think we live in this competitive, fast-driven culture but we're supposed to win and we're supposed to push forward fast and a quick fix. And I say with energy work, a lot of the time, it's that contraction, expansion, contraction, expansion. You can't just shoot the baby out. There's a whole process.
Yeah, yeah. No, and I love that you're saying that about, taking that time to build things slowly and, make a friend and connect because actually doing that in that friendship way is going to be better because when you're trying to, let's say, do it in a new relationship that might be a higher vibrational relationship that you're not ready for, it's going to trigger all your wounds in that moment, right? And so you're going to want to start working on those things. But with a friendship and at that kind of like lower level, what you're doing is you're creating that sense of safety, right? Where it's okay for me to relax. It's okay for me to expand my energy. It's okay. I feel safe now. I'm feeling safe on this level, and that you can build that up with that friend who you can be really vulnerable with. Now, if that friend ends up being your partner down the road, that's okay too.
Mhm. Well, now, Felicity, I do have an eye on that time. I want to make sure that we show people like where can they find you? Are you doing coaching? Do you do one-on-one coaching? Do you do classes? What's your whole package of stuff?
Nice, nice. Yes. So I mainly do one-on-one coaching. And the reason why is because we're diving into all these aspects of self, like in your inner realm, right? So I'm really helping you to understand like where the trauma exists in your body, like how that was created, the process that that was created, where to notice like your tools within yourself. How do I regulate my energy? Where do I find my energy? And also like how do I trigger my guidance, my soul's guidance? How do I develop that? So we go through that entire process of doing that, but not just as an intellectual process, but a tangible, felt process of you knowing exactly where to locate these things within yourself so that you are no longer dependent on anybody else for your healing. So that essentially you have all the tools that you need for the rest of your life to like place this trauma, process this trauma, and essentially coming back to that regulated place, right? Where you're aligned, where you can hear your soul's voice, and where you're able to follow your soul's voice and keep yourself regulated. So that's like the ultimate goal, right? And so with this one-on-one, it is a 6 week process of meeting weekly for 1 hour. And also, there's a time where we go deep into doing healing work together too. So it's a combination of hypnotherapy and somatic work where you're going into the wounds and helping to release and shift those wounds, while also learning how to use your soul's guidance to reframe your narrative. So essentially, you're learning how to let go of the wounded narrative and reprogram it with the soul's narrative so that you're not getting attached and caught up in all those negative voices and the spiraling and all the different things. And you're able now to not only shift, but to hear and follow your soul's voice so that you know what to do and what's aligned for you and what choices to make and all these different things. So that's a part of the whole thing, as well as I find it incredibly frustrating myself when I'm working with a coach if I am not able to reach them in between sessions. So I actually am available through Telegram and Messenger during the entire time that we are coaching together, so that you can ask questions or get feedback or know like, is this right? Am I doing this right? Like I feel like I don't know if I'm doing this right. And so I'm one of those people like I sleep like every 3 hours. So I might respond at 3 in the morning, I might, but I love helping you through that process because you need that feedback. You need to know like that you're doing it right, that you're finding the mechanisms within you. And that's the thing too, is that we're not using any tools or mechanisms that are external to you. So everything is internal, and I'm teaching you how to figure out your internal landscape and your tools and your mechanisms and your guidance and your energetic senses, so that you understand yourself as like this human soul interface, and how to regulate your energy or, whatnot. So all the things, I love it so much. And yeah, yeah. I also have a group membership for those of who are interested. I usually, though, really, I think that it works really well after you've done coaching together to hop into the membership for a month or two, at the very least, because what that does is that helps you to continue the process while you're kind of doing it more on your own, so you're not having my constant feedback and support, but you're able to kind of jump in and be like, okay, am I sustaining this? Am I implementing everything so that it's really integrating, into my system and whatnot, right? So, and then after that, you've got the tools to tend to yourself, to regulate yourself, to shift the narratives, to, understand your energy, to know what to do in those moments. Like you have all the tools. So, yeah.
Well, I love it. And if you're watching this video, please check out the link that you got in the email. So you'll have the link to the video and then the link to Felicity's speaker page. And her newsletter sign up will be there and her website and all the info. And please sign up for her newsletter. They're fantastic. I've been reading them as they come in, and the shadow stuff has been really good. There's all sorts of great, juicy, energetic nuggets. So please
Awesome.
check that out. And Felicity, thank you so much. This was wonderful.
Oh, thank you so much. I had so much fun. We really have to do this again.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you.
Yeah.